Wonderful, beautiful, melanated people. Welcome to the 8th episode of Got Melanin, hosted by myself, Melina Villeneuve, and WCAPS UK's very own Mari Faines. My good sis Mari, how are you doing today?
I'm Melly. It's good to see you. Good to be back. Happy Monday. I am so excited because we have a plethora of fine guests on our screen. If you're on YouTube, you're about to hear some great things if you're on Spotify. And we are happy to have everyone with us. I would be remiss if I didn't start this show the same way I do every single episode, because we are now 6 months waiting for justice for Breonna Taylor. We are over a year waiting for justice for Elijah McClain. Despite what you see on social media, we are still looking for justice for Jacob Blake. I'm sure Siana's about to bless us with some UK names, because we still are looking for justice for people like Mark Duggan and Stephen Lawrence, and we're talking years at this point. Mm-hmm. This episode is a second part to BLM, Where Are We Now? It is a conversation with other young folks to see how we're feeling, how we're doing, and what this movement really looks like in a diaspora context. This conversation is ever evolving and ever going, and we're happy to share this space with all of you. So before we get deep into our conversations, I'm gonna let all of our beautiful guests introduce themselves. I'm gonna start with Elke-Esmeralda.
Hi everyone. Hi, my name is Elke-Esmeralda, and I just want to thank Melina and Mari so much for having me today. So my name is Elke-Esmeralda, like I said. I am a young professional living here in DC. I was born in Cameroon and I was raised in New York City, so I'm a New York at heart forever. And I'm currently working in international development here in Washington, DC. And in my free time, I do a lot of activism work in the BLM space, in both education and at work, and you know, all of these different spaces. So I'm really excited to be here with you all and meeting all the other panelists. So thank you so much for tuning in.
We are happy to see you. Eni, do you want to tell us all about yourself?
Of course. I also want to echo everything that Elke-Esmeralda said. It's a pleasure to be here and to be, you know, in the presence of so many amazing individuals. And so my name is Eni. I live in Baltimore and I was born in Brooklyn, but I'm of Nigerian descent, like first generation, whatnot. And so I currently am a third-year student studying international relations and environmental studies with a minor in Spanish. And so I'm really interested in environmental governance and foreign diplomacy. I'm especially interested in the global South. And so right now I do a lot of work in terms of climate change policy and communication, as well as the other passion that I really have, which is prison activism and access to education in carceral spaces.
Excellent.
So much.
My God.
We love it.
Yeah, so much. Siana, my sister from the UK.
Hey, firstly, Mel and Mari are giving me so much life with the excitement. It's so nice to be part of something with such excitable hosts. So hi, I'm Siana Bangura. I am a writer, a producer, a community organizer, and have a portfolio career doing a lot of different things. Based in the UK, hailing from South London, originally from Freetown, Sierra Leone. So just adding to the diaspora vibe here today. And yeah, I am an organizer, as I said, doing work across race, class, gender, the arms trade, gentrification, climate justice. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting really into it today.
Excellent.
Amazing. We love it. And last but certainly not least, Ashley, tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Ashley Garrett. I am based out of the DC area. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. I am an auditor. I do oversight for the US government, working particularly on international development and aid issues. My family is originally from the South, but we migrated north and we've been in Boston ever since.
Excellent. Look at all this Black excellence. I'm sorry. I'm an asterisk. Black female excellence.
Hey, gang.
That part.
Snaps all around. No, and I think Mari and I are just so, last week we had also like an amazing time with Terry and Emily, which like if you haven't listened to it yet, you should definitely go listen / watch it now, and then come back to this later. But you know, it is just such a privilege and an honor for us to be able to have you and welcome you into what has become, I think it's safe for me to speak for both of us, what has become our safe space, like throughout the tumultuous last, is it 4 months now? Because it feels like 7 years.
It's been more. 4? What?
Yeah.
A lifetime, really. But I guess we'll give the COVID a 4 to 6 month range. But I think we can all agree this has been a lifetime of oh goodness.
A lot.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about the pandemic and how long that's gone on. I was like, it's been 10,000 years.
Yeah.
That too. Look at that BLM pandemic. Wow. But no, I think that's where we should start, right? We said, where are we now? I think the first question that I posed to the group is, how is everyone doing? How is everyone feeling? Where to start? Where are you now? Just decompress.
Yeah.
Whew. What kind of question is that?
And open anyone.
Yeah. Who wants to take it? I mean, I'll go. I'm actually doing okay today, definitely. I think it's fair to say it's natural for it to be very up and down, very high and low, peaks and troughs. There's been some real challenging times, and I think, you know, I definitely don't feel I've been at the sharp end of a lot of things at all, but like it's definitely been like mentally, emotionally testing, just the disruption to our daily lives. But also there's been a lot of space to connect in different ways. We're in the midst of like a revolution as well, and I'm pretty involved in that. So it's, you know, just been like really testing times, but we're living through something that we know will be in the history books. We know that will be foundational whatever happens next. So, you know, I think it's a privilege to be alive at this time and to work out what your space and contribution is. So I'm cool and very happy to be in your company.
I love that. I think you hit the nail on the head. I believe it was last week that I said, I feel like we go 2 steps forward and I take 6 steps back. And every day I'm just like hoping for the best and reminding myself that there was an entire generation that was built on resilience prior to my existence. And it is my duty and my job to continue that notion. But I think that's a lot of weight for us, especially as young women, to be carrying on our shoulders. So that's when I asked myself, because I know this isn't a monolithic narrative, we're all coping with it in different ways.
Coping is the word, yeah.
You know, how are we, I guess, coping with this as we are going through this moment, as Siana said, of peaks and troughs?
Yeah. Anyone got any tips? Because
For me, I will say I had like almost like a reality check, but in a very positive way yesterday, because so I'm doing classes remotely from home, and, you know, I was supposed to go abroad. I was supposed to live my little life in, you know, Berlin this semester and whatever. And that's obviously not happening because they closed the borders on us, right? Deservedly so, because we have been acting up. And so with that, you know, I have been doing classes at home. And I'm someone that has always utilized the library and like public spaces in order to really, you know, get myself in the mindset to be doing work and whatnot. And I would, no lie, I was complaining to my friends, like, yeah, you know, this is tough. Like, I don't know if I can like really focus, especially because it's not just with school, but a lot of the volunteer opportunities that I had in New York City, I can virtually somewhat do them, but it's definitely not the same, especially with, you know, being able to go into penitentiary centers and be with my students. Like, education on that front has really like taken a full stop, really. And so I was actually listening, well, first I read, and then I was listening to a podcast that was really describing, you know, the potential really downfall of so many students right now who are experiencing homelessness. And that for me kind of just shut me up, you know, and not like, oh, I don't realize and recognize that, you know, how I'm feeling is not valid or whatnot, but I feel like I was very grateful to have that reminder of you being in a home right now is so wonderful and so it's really a blessing in a way that you can't ever forget that, especially because there's so many people right now that are not having the opportunity. And so, yeah, for me, it's kind of, and again, my mom's like she's a nurse, like she's working in COVID units. And so it has been like harder just to go through this entire pandemic, but it's been really helpful to understand like, okay, where am I needed, and like, where can I immediately feel like I am contributing, and almost like distracting myself from me, like, you know, being able to wallow in my self-pity of, I'm not in Berlin, like walking those streets, like, okay, whatever, like it can happen in the future. So that was like a good reminder for me.
Thank you to your mom for all that she does.
For real. More power to you.
Absolutely. And so sorry you couldn't take advantage of study abroad, which, you know, it's crazy because, you know, with COVID and 2020 being the way that it is, I think, you know, it's a new reality that we're walking into. And to go back to your question of like, how am I and how are we doing? You know, like I said, 2020 has been an insane year for, I think, everybody across the board. And for the Black Lives Matter movement and just the phrase Black Lives Matter, it's been, you know, a very interesting time. You know, for me, sometimes I get a little bit overwhelmed, you know, being constantly bombarded with, you know, the harm of Black bodies and, you know, the abuse of Black bodies and the stealing of the lives of Black bodies and Black people, that sometimes, you know, we do become not desensitized to it, but it becomes a new normal. And that's something that I think, you know, with the more that we start listening and the more that we start really paying attention to like, wow, you know, this is, you know, Black Lives Matter for everybody. It has to be for everybody across the board. And we really have to listen to each other and kind of understand, you know, what does this mean to you as an individual? So I'm excited and I'm pumped up to see that people are finally taking the plugs out of their ears and paying attention to what their token Black friend is saying, or what their favorite athlete is saying, or what their favorite actor is saying about the realities of being Black in Hollywood, in the real world. And so I'm optimistic. Sometimes I'm tired. Sometimes I'm angry when companies, you know, they do exactly what we don't want them to do, you know. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. I have a lot of hope in our generation. So that's how I'm feeling right now so far.
What a great point. And to piggyback off of that, for me, I kind of just, it's really kind of like lots of like unlearning and breaking down a lot of things, like even like kind of the busyness code, like anyone who is in the DMV area, it's like, or any major city, it's always like, you have to be on the go. You have to be grinding. You always have to be doing this and everything. And really kind of like unlearning those things and being like, hey, it's okay that the only thing you were able to do today was your job. Or like you even had to take a day off to kind of just like deal with these kind of things and not feeling like, oh, well, that's bad. Or like, I should be, you know, doing more because I don't have to do this and everything. And really kind of just unlearning even just like how like you think about things and like how colonized like our thinking, our processes, and unpacking so much stuff, even around Black Lives Matter, like having other people bring into the discussion, like how sometimes even with that particular movement, it's so focused on particular Black people and particular Black lives that matter, and not being like all Black lives have to matter to everybody. And Black people are not a monolith. Like just because someone has a criminal record, that doesn't mean that they deserve to be shot. And just because one Black person has a criminal record, that doesn't mean that all Black people have criminal records. And that we should be seen as individuals in the way that other people are seen as individuals, where it's like that person did that, but not this person. And like, even the other day, like I was just listening to Tupac Changes, and like they had like a clip and he was like, I'm not responsible for all Black men. I'm only responsible for myself. I cannot tell other Black men what to do with their lives, I'm just trying to focus on myself. And I realized that like when you are a Black person, especially when you're a Black woman and everything, you are always the ambassador. You are always the ambassador to everything. Even thinking about the whole thing with like Megan Thee Stallion thing, where it's just like, we're literally telling people, don't hurt us, don't kill us and everything. But then when our own community does it to us, it's like, well, she deserved that. Well, she sings these racy lyrics. Well, this, and I'm like, do you not did you not like like Black Lives Matter isn't an asterisk. Like it's like
louder for everybody at the back, Ashley.
like it's not an asterisk where it's like, oh, these people can't kill us or hurt us and things like that, but these people can. Or like these Black lives matter, and there's a hierarchy within BML that matters and all these things. It's like all Black matters all the time, every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
One more time, if you
period.
Need the tape, run it back, listen to it again, and hear what she said.
I'm gonna make an audiobook out of that, because that was on point. And I think I even saw a comment on Shade Room or wherever that was something about like, but guys, it's fine. Like, she was just shot in the back of the feet. And I'm like, so in what world does that make any sense? And I think, I don't know, this is all of what everyone, thank you all, first of all, so much for just, express yourselves. Like, it's a blessing. And I want to just reinforce everything that you guys said. And actually, in light of speaking about like Black female empowerment, I want to give, not that she might even hear, but who knows, Naomi Osaka a massive shout out.
Hey, yes.
Girl, I am suddenly in love with tennis. Like, I want to watch tennis every day. Like, insane. And I don't know if you saw, but when she got her,
how she handled the questions. My good sis was tired. Because that first like lady reporter was all like, oh, what mask will you wear tomorrow? As if my girl's wearing it for fashion. That's 7 people killed by the police. And she can only wear 1 mask per day. If she was trying to cover everybody, there's not enough hours in the day. And then she obviously got tired, because when that reporter, the guy was like, what are you trying to tell us? She was like, well, what are you trying to get from this? My sister's tired of spoon feeding you.
Yeah. And the saddest part about, go ahead.
No, it's just that he had said like, what message are you trying to convey? And she said, well, what message did you get?
You could tell she was just like, come on now. Do I have to tell you everything?
Fed up. And again, somewhere I bless Instagram, but I read this thing that was basically saying like, you know, this girl was also raised in a culture where like shyness is praised, and like, you know, Japanese culture, like, not that I know anything about it, but from what I read, it was like, you know, you don't speak up. And even like, I can think of like,
good point.
Congolese culture, my mom's culture, women it's not that you don't say your opinion, but it's like, you know, you're a woman. Like, it's great that you're there and everything, but you don't have like a political opinion or like a political weight in that way. And so I think she's not Congolese, she's Haitian, but regardless.
But for her to speak up, you're saying it's like such a big thing. Yeah.
And I find that just so admirable. And especially, again, like when she first came out with the BLM statement and saying that she wasn't going to play and stuff, the amount of, I scrolled through her comments, that poor girl, man, like the amount of abuse of like, it's literally the concept
just
of
a
like,
tennis player.
Shut up and dribble, shut up and play tennis, like, you're only 20, you don't know anything, like all this stuff. And it's like, how dare you speak on someone's experiences for them in such a way, you know? Like, that's what blows my mind.
But even when, like, my friend who lives in Japan, she took a screenshot, thank you to Instagram again, and she took a screenshot of the Google searches that come up when you just put in her name on Japanese Google. And the things that you see, not surprisingly, is racist, you know, all of these insults going against her character because of her skin color, even though she's one of theirs. She belongs to them, but it's like, she's still too Black to be Japanese. And it's like,
she denounced her US citizenship. Like, she literally is Japanese. She chose that, you know?
And we haven't even talked about Venus and Serena. Lord.
Right? Like,
and they're still dealing with it.
100%.
That's the position of Asian and Black culture. Let's look. Tiger Woods is Black and Asian.
Yeah.
Osaka is Black and Asian.
Yeah.
Think about the differences in the way that they talk about race, both especially being effective parts of American culture and American society in predominantly white sports. Let's think about the difference in the way that they choose to carry their Blackness,
and interact with it.
As a Black woman.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too, because like there are 2 folds that are going on there. So I used to play squash, and within racket sports and things of that sort, there is a certain way of conduct that you have. And that was something that was so difficult, like being a Black body in a primarily white upper class sport at that. Whereas like where I grew up and everything, people mostly play basketball, football, and things like that. Like I'm born and raised in Boston or anything. My parents and stuff, they're proud like Patriots fans. So you can like scream and you can yell, you can cheer, you can do all these things and everything. And then when you come into racket sport culture of the high society brown and things like that, you're not supposed to do that. Like you don't sweat, you glisten and like you're not supposed to, you know, have those confrontations and have those things. And it was very difficult because I started playing out a program which is like designed for kids in a city, and we play other kids in other cities and things like that. And between us, because we came from those sports cultures, we had that. We had jeering, we had chants, we had all these things. And then to enter through into college where you don't have that, where like if there is another Black player, they're like, oh, well, do you know them? And I'm like, no, I'm from Boston. They're from Barbados. Like we don't know each other.
I'm like,
I don't know, homegirl.
Yeah. But they're like, oh, well, they're Black and you're Black and you like play squash in high school, like with Black people. And I'm like, yeah, but like squash is an international sport. Like
literally,
like there are other people, like we don't all know each other. Like, yeah, there isn't that many squash players.
We're all related. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Literally. Yeah.
And it's like if you say if you're from like a particular country that's maybe like lesser known in Africa, for example, and then they're like, oh, I know someone from Jamaica. You're like, okay, nothing to
cool story, bro.
Like sorry, what?
Yeah. And so the fact that she spoke out and everything in that kind of like high society type of people, and to have those statements, because even like now with professional athletes in general, they don't want you to speak out. It's like, you're just supposed to perform.
Look how Lewis Hamilton's being treated.
Right.
Play your role.
Right. And play your role, and that's it. Like, this is what you're good at. This is what this is what your acceptance into is. It's like,
this is your place in society. You don't speak these things, even though you're a like citizen as well as a sports player, an actress, or whatever. And
you're supposed to be one-dimensional. You're not supposed to have all these things and everything and be a person. And as soon as you break out of that and show this other side of yourself, then you're demonized. And I feel like just the fact that she was able to do that, and she was partly able to do that because of Venus and Serena, because of Althea Gibson, you know, and Arthur Ashe, like if you want to even go back even further, and like these people breaking the mold. I mean, you know, even Jesse Owens, like he literally ran against the Nazis. Like, and like having like that as a person, like, and it really solidifies like Americans come in all shapes and sizes and diversity and everything. Americans do all these other things, and they're not just these siloed people. And like having her as a figure where it's like she has these different elements in her nationality and heritage and everything. Japanese people also speak out and care about Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter is not just an American thing. It's a worldwide thing, because these problems are systematic and are going on across the world with people of the diaspora across the world. Like, it isn't just here in the United States and everything that people are facing backlash. Like, backlash is happening all across the world in different forms and different ways and everything. And here is this girl who is standing up and saying like, hey, our lives matter.
Yeah. And even if you look at like the international sports, like soccer, for example, you know, it's very interesting when you think of a sport like soccer and basketball, where a majority of the MVPs, a majority of the top scorers, a majority of the team members that make the team as powerful as they are become demonized. So in soccer, for example, if a player, for example, if I take Mbappe, right, who's a national player on the France's team, yes, ramenez la coupe à la maison. Yes. So exactly. So if he, for example, he's Black, he is from Cameroon, he's of Cameroonian descent, and he's also French. But when he makes a mistake, or any other African
he's
player,
then Cameroonian.
Yes, he's then becomes, oh, you know, the Cameroonian player, you know, missed the
but when he's doing good,
shot.
He's French. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it becomes so hypocritical, like hypocritical in this situation of like, wow, you know, we really want you to win for our country, and we really want you to renounce your nationality that you were born with to then take on our nationality that you were not born with, but you're still not seen as one of us fully because of what you are innately given. And so when you're talking about, you know, the hierarchy of sports and the hierarchy of like the vision of Black people in some of these sports, when you think of autocross, is that what it's called, the racing games, or the you know, when the cars are racing, how many Black athletes can you name in that sport? Golf, all of these sports where you need money, where you literally you cannot play golf without golf clubs, you
100%.
cannot do hockey without a hockey stick. But soccer and basketball, all you need for soccer is 2 little rocks. You take a t-shirt and some rubber bands and you have your whole game right there. So it's just very interesting when you think of like class sports and Blackness and classism. It's very interesting.
It's literally exactly that. Like there was I don't know where it's available anymore, but when I went home to somehow French, ramener la coupe à la maison. So like watch this documentary about Nicolas Anelka, which is one of the greatest French players ever, because the man is a god, like on the field. He's amazing. But he's amazing because he was like a city kid that would, the same way that you were saying, would just kind of like play around in like the outskirts of Paris and stuff. He was like the youngest kid to join the like national French football team, like training grounds at something like 16 or 15. Like it was insane.
Always. They pick him young.
The thing is, they just called him anytime that he wasn't basically, benefiting whoever he was playing for, because the man switched clubs around like crazy because of that reason, mostly. But it would just be like, oh, he's arrogant, he's this, he's that. When it's like, no, he's really good and he knows his worth. Therefore, he will not let you tell him that like, oh, you really should respect da-da-da, if he actually feels that like this person doesn't deserve respect because they've disrespected him. And in the 2010 World Cup, oh God, I forgot the word there. But at the World Cup in South Africa, like he just left because there was this whole, I'm gonna call it a travesty really, because that's what it was. But the head coach lied to the press, said that he had called him like a whatchamacallit, all kinds of like insults, like gross insults, like insulting mother type of insults. And no one tried to verify whether or not that was true. So that was printed all over the press. You have Nicolas Sarkozy, like the former French president, that's out here talking about this is a disgrace and this is not how France acts. Okay. And then you have like the Minister of Sports and Health Education that is on parliamentary floor calling the French team, who like boycotted their game in support of him, thugs. She called them thugs, knowing that the majority of the team
they love to use that word in every context. It's the first thing, thugs.
Everyone's favorite word.
Everyone's favorite word, thugs.
Thugs.
In French, it's des caïds. Like, if you call someone a caïd, that's like high roller, like, thug. Like, you got some... No. And I was like, really? All of this for a lie? And the fact that 8 years later it comes out in a documentary where the coach himself admits like, oh yeah, he never said that.
Always.
And to this day, nothing is done.
It always comes out later. Emmett Till, all these things, it comes out later that it was a lie.
But my question is, at what point do we recognize
there's no accountability?
That, like, these false accusations, because that whole fiasco influenced law, like French law, in terms of like the press and freedom of press and like whether something is slanderous or defamatory or if it's not. So at what point are we going to reverse that law now? Because clearly it was based on a lie.
Well, as Siana said, we still have not got justice for Emmett Till, who the woman is.
Exactly.
And she's now living her full-fledged life.
Yeah. Exactly. There's no accountability.
Accountability is relative. I'm really glad, Siana, you brought up Emmett Till, because that gives me back to like kind of the question that we've been swirling around in our conversation about sports, which is, this is a youth-led movement. Even if we're talking about athletes, those are young people. Those are people 16 to 35, because we all know an athlete's life is not that long.
Yeah.
The thing that everybody keeps talking about in this very particular movement is its influence of social media, is the influence of youth getting access to platforms, is youth being in the streets.
Yeah.
And I guess these are our age mates, right? This is our demographic. We all said in a different way in which we're choosing to be activists. And we've said that we're not a monolith, because even if you look at every woman on this screen, the way that we choose to engage with Black Lives Matter and with this movement are all very different and very effective. So I guess my question is, what do we have to say to people who are saying this is a youth movement and that's a bad thing? What are we saying to people that it's a youth movement and that's a good thing? How do we see our role in this space if we know that it's already taxing? But how do we see ourselves continuing to push this movement forward if, for the reason that Mel just said, people are going to push back either way?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I just been thinking about this in terms of just with everything, we have to do it twofold. So we have to do work within the community and also outside of the community, because we have really become colonized in like the way we think, the way we act. I don't know if you guys have been watching, there's a new show called Lovecraft Country, and it's basically, yes.
Oh my gosh, that is my favorite show. Thank
So
you.
good.
Oh my goodness.
So good.
Okay, I do not know the show.
I highly recommend you
Okay,
watch it.
cool.
It's on HBO right now.
Me and Elke are like, we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that one, but I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
What is it called again?
Lovecraft Country.
Lovecraft Country.
So Jordan Peele is one of the executive producers.
Oh, okay.
So basically in it, and one I love because it talks about Black horror. Like a few years ago, they were like, oh, Black women don't like horror movies, so we don't really like make horror movies for them or have like.
Oh, someone
Black
told me
women
about the show. Okay, yeah.
And
yeah.
I was just like, what? I was like, did you just pick 3 random people on the street who happen to be Black? And they were like, yeah, I don't like horror movies. And they're like, oh, all Black women don't like horror movies.
None of them.
And so many time in like that genre that Black people are not in it, or if they're in it, they're victims, they're very shallow characters, that's it. So what I like about this show is that it's showing the horror element, but then it's also tackling these things about race and trauma and history. And I use that show as an example because as an example of we need to go into all spaces. Like we need to go into all spaces, and we also need to stop policing ourselves and saying, well, this is Black and that's not Black. Mm-hmm. Well, this is that and that's not Black. And we don't belong here. We don't deserve here. Because a lot of that comes from like the constant colonization of our minds and everything, where it's like, well, these are Black spaces, these are not. And like even like just a few years ago when I watched Hidden Figures, I was like, there were Black women at NASA at this time. How come this is the first time I'm ever hearing this?
Not just at NASA, literally like foundational to
yeah.
To
and
NASA.
then your mind starts to like wander, and you're like, well, was there like a Black men's group who also was there? Was there like Asian Americans, Indigenous people? What other aspects or things and everything that were out there that just were never talked about, that was never shown, that was never depicted? And when you start to see that, and you start like, even with the whole thing with Black Panther, like all these little kids are seeing Black Panther and they're seeing themselves, and you're seeing themselves in a knot and a slave motif and things like that and everything.
Finally, thank you.
Yeah, they're seeing themselves
like
mentioning
Black Panther breaking my heart.
Yeah, I know. I know. 2020, man,
honestly
terrible. But I personally feel like 2020 is literally just setting everything asunder for us to rebuild. If you believe in the Bible or anything biblical, the second coming was supposed to be setting everything on fire. So I guess this is it.
In the form of a pandemic is fire. There are fires though too. California.
Right. Well, not just California. I mean,
listen,
there's
everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere. But kind of just like having to rebuild these things and rebuild these toxic foundations and everything, and really just tear down the house and start anew.
And first of all, assessing your foundation, I think, right? What was your foundation even built on? Like when we think about our parents, and we think, I mean, a lot of us I've heard are from Africa or have African roots. And even if you don't, you are by the beauty of having melanin. Exactly. You are a member of the diaspora. Amen.
Yes.
So sometimes it's like we have to look back at our own selves. And like you said earlier, Ashley, we need to introspect and think about our own traumas
Mm-hmm.
and understand where is it that some of these things came up. You know, when you're thinking about
Yes.
trauma and you're thinking about therapy, for example, I know that in a lot of our cultures, therapy is like,
Yeah.
sorry, we don't do that. We know, like
Right.
You
you're
decide
saying,
to
right?
impersonate
Like,
an auntie.
like,
Right.
sorry,
No,
no, no, no, no,
100%.
no. You keep your stuff at home. You keep your stuff
Mhm.
at home, and these things build up. And it's the little comments too, you know, like, oh, you know, you're Black, you know, sometimes you don't maybe, and it's the things that even your parents can tell you, like, oh, maybe that shirt's too loud, or shh, don't speak too loud, you know, like, do well, but don't be too. You have to be humble, you know. Don't overspeak. You're always, you know, we know you're in the room because of this beautiful chocolate brown lusciousness of melanin that we have. But it's like, as a society, and the beauty of us being young and bringing it back to the power of youth, is that I think the more that we talk about and the more that we normalize the beauty of really understanding this foundation and breaking down these, you know, these traumatic experiences that we have, and instead of like living around them, living through them and giving the opportunity to really come to terms with, how did this affect me? And why do I see myself in this light? You know, why is it that when I'm in white spaces, I'm giving an example, you know, sometimes we go out to a bar, or you go out to a club, or you go out to an evening event, and you know in your mind that this is a blank establishment, or this is a Black establishment. Oh, I'm going to be a token here. Oh, I'm not going to be a token there. And you start thinking of like, why, how do we start, how did we get these thoughts in our mind? So as the youth, I think it's beautiful that we're giving a lot of space for us to learn, and for us to talk, and for us to just break down those generational painful thoughts that we've had forever. You know, that the Black woman has to be a single mom, or that the Black woman has to be super sassy and she always has to talk like this. And we're challenging that and being like, you know what? Black lives matter. And if you do talk like that, yes, your life matters. But if you speak like this, that doesn't mean that your life matters any less or matters anymore. If you have higher education, your life matters. If you didn't have the blessing to go to school, or if you were ended up in prison, like we were saying earlier, or if you happen to be blessed to be, you know, really affluent or not, we all matter. And I think as young people, we're starting to realize that that is our power. Our power is really in coming together and learning from each other, and really seeing like, since we are the future of tomorrow, how can we create this society that is, you know, clear-minded and very, you know, respectful of other cultures, and also putting the fact that, you know, Black Lives Matter first, whether it's on your social media feed or not, you know. So
just to chime in on that, I think it's like super powerful what you're saying. And I was going to say, you know, I think it's sometimes there's this kind of notion, I think, that, how do I describe it? I think it's false, but there's like an idea that maybe our parents, our grandparents had to like tolerate more. And what I mean by that is weren't able to kind of clap back in the way that we can today. And I think first and foremost, there's some truth in that, and also not completely. Like, I think when I think about the British context specifically, thinking about like, you know, parents that came from like the Windrush generation, and, you know, Africans who came, you know, before and after that and stuff like that, there was a certain level of kind of outright racism. The UK is still hella racist, by the way, definitely. But there's a certain level of outright racism where you had to definitely just move differently. I think for us, I don't know, it almost feels like we know that we are free to take up space differently. Not really because the challenges are different, the challenges are gone, but I would say they've changed shape. And in a landscape where you're dealing with like a pandemic, you're dealing with another economic crisis, you're dealing with the consequences of living in the aftermath of slavery, right? Living in the present reality of racism in a country that actually is the great exporter of racism, the great exporter of white supremacy, and also the great denier of all of that. I think what is really powerful, and what I see in my generation of Black Brits, listen, that's the parent of the USA. I say that always.
Thank you, parent.
It's the parent, the racist parent. But yeah, so I think for me, like my generation, it seems like, you know, I think, you know, we are definitely standing on foundations that were already built for us. And I also think when I speak to elders, they're like, look, we're tired and we need the baton we have to pass the baton. I think sometimes there can be difficulties with elders passing that baton on. But I do think what you see with this particular way, for me, I think of like my sister, she's 17. even though I was always pretty like aware of what was going on, I think what is really different about this generation is they've got language that maybe we didn't have at a younger age. They've got language to speak of their condition, language to speak of their oppression, language to talk about social justice in a way that I just think maybe like is a little bit different than what we've seen before. You know, they are the generation that kind of always had social media, always had the internet. And even though, you know, there's always kind of ups and downs of social media and stuff like that, but the very fact that like a movement like Black Lives Matter can start on the internet and then have out, you know, real world ramifications says a lot. So I almost think we've almost like kind of like we got nothing to lose here. Like all of this is happening. If you're seeing people go on the streets in the middle of a pandemic that is actually disproportionately affecting Black people, brown people, then we already know that, listen, you're weighing up the odds. Like, am I going to die from COVID or am I going to die from the pandemic that is racism? So I need to get out there and do my thing. So I think, you know, back to an earlier point that was made about actually there's a point that we made around Naomi and kind of the ramifications of BLM and how, you know, everything that's happened in the US has ripple effects across the globe. I think even more so this time than we've seen before. We saw marches in New Zealand, as far as New Zealand, right? We saw Indigenous people there making these connections, talking about, you know, the way that they are marginalized in their communities, where they are brutalized as Black, brown, Indigenous people there. So I think that it's a hopeful moment. I think we are tired as young people, but I think we do have the energy knowing that, you know, if we're not the generation that finally ends this, then we're going to have another generation of our children saying something as basic as Black Lives Matter. So yeah, I just wanted to chime in on that, because everything that you know, that Ashley and Elke was saying, I was just kind of like, absolutely. I just think we're ready. Like, we kind of know, like, this, we have to, you know, when you are aware of your condition, when you are aware of your oppression, you do become at war with your society. I believe it's Baldwin that told us this. So I do think like we're at war with our societies right now. And like we're ready basically, you know, and I just think we're fed up of seeing what our parents had to deal with, our grandparents, our ancestors, we're fed up. And this is why a lot of these young people, particularly school-age young people in this moment, you know, their education has been disrupted. Nobody has apologized for that. And they're like, well, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do my thing, you know? And I'm really proud to see what's happening with particularly a generation a little bit younger than ourselves as well.
Yeah.
I would like to add to that and just say, one of the things though I fear is that, like, all this isn't new. And I think in some form, like whether it's slave rebellions or wherever have you and everything, people have always been like, this is not right.
Exactly.
That we need to do something about it. My worry and my fear, and this is why I was said earlier, like we need to like go into everything. And this is like me talking from like a government standpoint and a policy standpoint, is that we really have to cement the foundation that these things are not right. Like here in the US, we had like these 8 years with Obama, and it was like, oh, we're seeing changes, we're seeing this, we're seeing changes on like the symbolism front, but we're also seeing changes like on a structural front. But those things were not laid into the ground because only a small bit of people were buying into that and working onto that. Exactly. So we only had things like executive orders saying X, Y, and Z are going to happen, not having Congress pass laws, which would cement those things permanently. And so when I was saying that we have to go into all aspects, sports, science, history, everything, we also have to think about submitting things. Like even this right now, this podcast, this whether it's YouTube or in everything, this is now being recorded, and this now can, when historians and things look back on it, they'll say, oh yeah, we have a clip of like young Black women from all around the world, from all around the diaspora, talking about these things. And that this can go forward and say, this is what people were speaking about. This is what people were thinking about. Because sadly, those things do get lost to history, and then we don't know, and we can't trace it back. So like one of the things I feel like we have to do also too is just cement the foundation and cement those things in, and cement the fact that we are not monoliths, like period. Like we're just not, like that's the biggest thing that we need to get across. Like Black Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter, we're not monoliths. Amen. And that's like the first line that we have to cross with everybody. And then going from there and like seeing and just normalizing Blackness, normalizing like Black vegans, Black meat eaters, Black everything, you know?
Definitely.
I think they exist.
Yeah. We have a person in our group, in our midst right now, because the rest of us are all professionals, who's actually in school and like.
Yes, I was going to say, Eni, what do you think?
The world, like the true youth is, because like we're all young. But, like,
I was gonna say, you're all definitely like
a Black person in Black Lives Matter.
Yes,
like a true youth in the
true youth. Okay.
Yeah. So no, trust me, I'm definitely like, wow. everyone's young here, but no, so to be like the closest
Yeah.
to, you know, having grown up, like I do remember typing www dot before, you know, certain websites. Like I do remember that, you know, I'm a little on notice. I know, I'm kidding.
Okay.
But no, I do remember that. And so for me, I definitely, so it's really interesting because I hear a lot of people talk about my generation, like, oh yeah, like just how I guess intersectional, interdisciplinary a lot of people are thinking. Like I honestly agree. Like there's so many people that I talk to, and when they're weaving these intricate problems together because they're able to see how they're so interactive with one another, I really do appreciate that. However, this is not necessarily to like down on my generation, but it's really just to urge us to hold ourselves more accountable. And I say this because, so obviously, like my feed when everything started to happen, both in the beginning of the pandemic, but also throughout the protests over the summer and whatnot, that are still continuing, no matter what the media like tries to like, you know, highlight right now, but whatever, is that, you know, a lot of people were posting a lot of stuff. And so I have always been very like vocal about certain things, especially in the spaces within like, you know, outside of the academic sphere, basically. And I say that specifically because there are so many times that being the only Black person, being the only Black woman, especially, and having both of those identities is so easy for people to have expected me to be vocal, and I could have shied away. Or there's so many times where if I wasn't the only Black person, that other Black person wasn't like comfortable enough to step up, which I have no problem with. But like it always seemed to me like there was no way I wasn't going to let this, you know, I wasn't going to let it slide, like not in my presence and not with my identities, you know, constantly being under threat. And so I always spoke about it. And I didn't necessarily, I spoke about it on social media, I spoke about it in person. But as time went on and I was seeing how people were reacting and people, you know, entering this movement, to me, it was like really refreshing, and then got very irritating. And I say that because I talk about slacktivism. And so one of the things that I really don't appreciate is the fact that a lot of people, you know, will talk about a lot of like theoretical abstractionist like theories and whatnot on social media in a way that's like, eat the rich, blah, 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 like things that are like just sayings and not necessarily concentrated in particular ways of mobilizing change. And so I had to like, I think it was in the middle of May or so, I had to get on my social media after being silent, and people were like, yeah, why aren't you posting, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you're asking me why I'm not posting? Are you kidding me?
Because I'm doing
but anyways,
stuff out here.
Right, right.
Busy.
But I went on my social media and I was like, yeah, I understand the anger. It might be new for you. It might have been brewing your entire life. I understand the frustration. I understand the excitement of seeing so much flooding your screens. And I urge people to not only direct that either towards only protesting or through posting, but also through either making your own community group or joining a community activist group. Like that's the thing that I don't understand. Like with local change comes the responsibility that you will step up to those local community organizers and give your voice. And when you go to a lot of the meetings about, you know, zoning, when we talk about gentrification, or when we talk about, you know, environmental issues and whatnot, you see no young people. They don't show up to that. And so I just feel like for everyone that has, you know, either it began really understanding and educating themselves about things like police brutality and, you know, structural and systematic racism. Of course, like everyone is going on their own pace and whatnot, but I really urge people to recognize that, you know, you don't have to be in a protest to feel like you are a worthy adversary in this movement. You don't have to, you know, be the president of this club or that club. All you have to do is earnestly feel like you are dedicating time and energy towards this movement. And I think a lot of people forget that the way that a lot of these things started was by the community coming together in those community organizing groups. And the more that people realize that, the more I think, you know, you'll finally get to know what young people actually think about a lot of things. A lot of times they just use us as like, you know, almost like an entity and not actually like a voting block, which because we don't actually come out to vote, are as, you know, more tangible ways of enacting our voice in these spaces. So yeah, I'm really excited, and I see a lot of people like, you know, on social media right now, and I just have to wonder like, okay, like,
You want
did
the
you
energy
guys...
to shift basically to
Right,
like the next
yeah.
stage and the next stage and the next
Exactly.
stage.
Exactly. So that's like my 2 cents of things. But I definitely think as a student, like I saw so many TikToks of people like, you know, making jokes about how it's gonna be when everyone comes back to school and everyone's gonna be chanting in the, you know, yards of school and whatnot. And I'm like, ah, ha, ha, I guess, but what else are we gonna do after that, you know?
For real. I think me and Mari had like said the start as well, like in probably, again, if you haven't listened to the earlier episodes of Got Melanin, please feel free to go and watch and listen to them. Thank you very much. But with all that, you know, it was like the question of like, I wonder at what point our feeds will go back to the regularly scheduled programming.
They've started going back to regular programming, babe.
Sorry?
They've started going to regular programming already, babe.
Mine's been back in regular programming.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even, I mean, since June, since whatever. Point being is they did go back. And I think it's one of those where it's like, again, like everyone wants to be like, not involved. It's not a question about a bandwagon necessarily, but like, you don't want to think of this. I don't want to think of this as a bandwagon, because obviously for all 6 of us and many more people throughout this world and in this lifetime and the next and the one before, like, it's not a bandwagon. It's very much a real life that's happening. And like, I think that's it. Yeah, one of the things as well is that like I'll occasionally still have like that one person on my feed that like will share something or whatever, but it's like, realistically, like, what are you doing? Like, because if you're not calling out your friend who says that she wants to get with a black guy because she wants mixed kids, then you're not doing anything. If you're not calling out like the person that's asking someone like, when did your hair grow so much? Like, you're not, do you know what I mean? Like, that everything else, it's not that it doesn't matter, but like this is the everyday like activism stuff that you do, like from a non-political, like from a non.
It's all political. It's definitely all political, though. I think I was going to say the way I look at it is basically this is a long-term struggle, and I think whatever, for me, every generation has its problems, right? And I think the problem is that we've had just every generation in living memory has been dealing with racism, and I think, to be honest, there will always be some form of isms, right? But it's about like new problems. For me, I frame it as we need stamina. And I think this is the test, right? With anything that is a marathon, you need stamina. And I think a lot of people are looking for this like overnight change. Something that is at least 500 years old can't be undone in like 5 weeks, 500 weeks. And I think this is what we see. You know, you're hearing like white people talk about like, oh, I have fatigue over like empathy, you know, crap like that basically, right? And it's like, okay, get out. But the point is, people need stamina, and I think this is what we're seeing now. I think I always say the true test of who you are is what you do when there are no cookies, what you do when no one's looking, what you do when it's not glamorous, what you do when it's not on Instagram. That is the true test of your character. And I think this is what people are struggling with. And actually, to add to what Eni said, it is that thing of like the transition. I think there's actually nothing wrong with your awakening coming like on social media and coming off this peak, right? And like the movement, right? If we think about movement ecology, that's okay. And I think, you know, I've been guilty of it myself in the past, like poo-pooing people's like efforts, you know, when I'm kind of like, you know, and it comes from a skepticism for sure. It comes from a skepticism. But in this moment, I've committed myself to like not being so skeptical and actually being like, all right, I'm really pissed that it's taking you this long to wake up. But also welcome, you're here, what now? And I think this is where already my disappointment is, because already, you know, from the corporations, which of course, you know, they move like that, to individuals, you see people that are already like, okay, they bought the books, they watched the films, they followed people, now what? And I think this is the critical moment that we're in. Things are still very much alive, like in the USA. In maybe other parts of the world, I can only speak for the UK, it does seem like it's quieter now, right? We're not on the streets like we were. But there are other battlefronts. I hate war metaphors, as we know, but there are other ways that you like fight basically. And I think this is what we need to be like looking at. And I think you know, there are like young groups in the UK right now, like Tribe Named Athari, for example. They're doing great work. They're still getting on the streets, but they're also like doing reading groups. They're doing all sorts of things, events.
Yeah.
And it's this constant awakening, a constant raising of consciousness that we need to keep doing. And I think it's about the stamina. And I think that's something that people are needing to build in this moment. And I guess it remains to be seen how genuine and sincere these commitments that people have made have been.
No, I think you're right. And I think that's actually a really good transition point as we are entering, sorry, everybody who's listening, the latter end of our show. Like, what do you guys, each of you, honestly, feel like you want to see from people going forward? We've all talked about, we want to lay foundations. We want to reckon and recognize the past and how it has laid and paved the way for us to move forward. But we also understand that this moment is unique, and every way in which people operate in it is going to be unique. So what are we as a group, although be it not a monolith, we are still a group because we're on this screen. What are we hoping to see come out of this moment as we're looking at, I'm not even gonna say we're looking at the end of BLM, I'm saying as we're looking at the next 6 months, honestly, because it's exactly what Siana said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. If it was easy, it would have been done a long time ago.
Period.
So yeah, I'm gonna pose that question to literally everyone, including you, Mel. What are you hoping to see going forward?
We want an answer from you as well, Mari.
Back to me. Don't worry.
Okay. I can go first. So I guess like for me, what I'm looking for is one, kind of like making these things not to be like, well, these are just Black issues. Like, I love that someone brought up the fact that like we started to see, like, it basically caused people to be like in New Zealand to be like, hey, we are also facing these same issues and everything. Like, these things are happening to us too. So I guess like my kind of like vision and kind of thinking about these things is like, and it's like kind of like the changing of language and talking about things of taking academic things and making them into colloquial language so more people can understand and more people can ingest and have these types of things. So when I think about it, it's raising up it from just being a Black issue and being like, this is a human rights issue. This is a human rights violation. These people are human and you're violating their natural human rights. And talking about those things at those levels and getting people in and getting people to criticize these powerful nations, getting people from other places to say, the United States is committing the same types of things that the United States is always accusing other people of doing. And they're doing this to Black, Indigenous people. They're doing this to women, and actually sticking up and saying, hey, you guys cannot do this. These people matter. Instead of being like, well, you know, it's not that bad there. We're here. It's really bad. These people are terrible. And raising that up, and even the way that we talk about people, like, I love that the narrative is no longer being like slaves and it's talking about enslaved people. Because it reiterates the fact that these people were human beings and not just mere property. And that slavery isn't just a laughable offense or something, or it was an old-timey thing and everything, that these were human beings. And start to establish that these people were Dutch, these people were British, these people were Americans. And stop being like, oh, well, like I remember someone was saying, oh, well, if Lincoln wasn't assassinated, we would have just sent them back to Africa. And I'm just like, what? You know, and like, because I'm just like, one, at that point in time, these people were not from African nations. And two, they were from many different African nations, and you didn't bother to even keep records. Three, you weren't providing any transportation back to these places, integration, any kind of funds or anything to try to quote unquote ship these people back to the homeland. The United States at that time was their homeland. They spoke English. They had lived here for centuries and stuff and generations and everything. And they're part of the story and diversifying the narrative of people. So that's, I guess, my larger overall goal. And then we need to have like smaller steps. How to get people involved, how to get things on the ballot, how to get policies, how to get politicians, how to get professors, how to get other people talking about these things and normalizing it and not and being like, well, that's just a Black thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't help but think of the person that was like, y'all got a return ticket? I don't have, but it just like, that's ridiculous. Absolutely.
For me, I would say I'm definitely someone that agrees with and I really want to reinforce the importance of saying that all Black lives matter in a very earnest way, because the thing that frustrated me, especially with social media, is that the same time that everything about race relations concerning police brutality was happening in my community at my school and whatnot, there were a lot of people that actually spoke out a bit about sexual assault and sexual violence done against their Black bodies as Black women identifying individuals. And for me, it was so annoying to see that the way that people talk about Black Lives Matter is almost always is in response to a death and does not actually highlight the fact that there's so many people that have been broken by, outside of their community, within their community, that are not being considered in that narrative of Black lives mattering, And so when you talk about trans lives, like, do you understand how the system is constantly denying them of opportunity to ensure that they can live a standard of living that is acceptable? Like, do you understand that with environmental racism, you are denying people the ability to live further than just, the polluted community that they are subjected to? And so with that, I'd really encourage people to look at Black Lives Matter as, yes, it matters to all the identities, even the ones that are unfortunately marginalized within the Black community, but also it extends to people while they're living. You can't just wait until they're dead to be like, yeah, their life mattered. Like, no, what were you doing while they're alive to make sure their life could have mattered more if it does unfortunately result in death? And so that's why, I have, and I won't get into it, but like my philosophy on like using hashtags of names and whatnot is like different, but I really do try, to highlight the situations of people that are living right now. For example, in Lebanon, and like a lot of like African migrant women that are in these places that are not being protected. Like, does their life matter? If it does, why don't you try to help it right now while they're still alive? So I really want that conversation maybe to be more considered when we're talking about the BLM movement, because although it originated from a very particular kind of issue, if we're going to expand it in order to be more inclusive, then we should do that in a way that is truly more inclusive.
Definitely. Definitely.
Wow. Snaps all around. Snaps all around. Snaps all around.
The youth is good, eh? The youth is there. It's good.
I guess I can go next. So going off of what you said, wow. I think we have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot that I hope for. So I just jotted down some things so that I don't forget. First and foremost, I need, and I hope, and I'm gonna not even say hope because I really need this to happen, and we need this to happen. We need more non-Black people. I'm gonna say this one more time because I know you guys are listening. We need more non-Black people to stand up and to tell their friends to pull up. In the words of Rihanna, we need non-Black allies,
and the families,
and I don't
too.
mean an ally. Hello, and I mean advocate. Let's change that ally word, because an ally can be someone standing right by you, but an advocate is someone who's going to fight for you. Amen. So I need more non-Black people to stand up, to check their own privilege, and understand that Black Lives Matter is not the beginning of a hurt Olympics. Just because we say that Black Lives Matter and that we are discriminated against, and that we have some experiences that are based solely on the color of our skin, does not mean that your life doesn't matter, or that the experiences that you went through did not also put you at disadvantaged positions. So I really need non-Black people to step up and to really listen and learn about how can I do what I need to do to make this world a little better place. Who can I talk to in my family? How can I make sure that the votes within my own family count, so that it's not just me, but it's my family also? Next point on my little list, I scribble. I think more Black people need to have these hard conversations in group settings, especially with people that we do not know, from walks of lives that we do not have the luxury of stepping in their shoes in. I think we need to be having these hard conversations about colorism and about why is it that, when you look at Black athletes, Black actors, Black Hollywood, Black men, I'm saying, who are they on the arms? Who's on their arm? Who are they standing next to? Can we talk about our dating preferences and how sometimes our dating preferences can be racist? So these are the conversations that we as Black people, I hope that we can understand, that this whole, oh, my vote doesn't count, I don't want to vote. Can we move past that and understand that every single vote counts, regardless of the fact that our democracy and our democratic system, has in place the electoral college that can just veto the public? That's a whole other topic for a whole other day. But we need to come to terms with these hard topics and stop putting ourselves back, like giving ourselves an extra push. And as these companies are publicizing and commercializing this Black Lives Matter movement, one, it's a good thing because it's getting the name out there, and like places like Tinder and Call of Duty are putting huge messages of like, we do not support racism. If you Uber that huge huge billboard, I need you guys to be honest and serious with yourselves. When you look at yourselves at the end of the day, these corporations, these organizations, what are you doing as the head of Amazon, the head of enter company name here, to make sure that the Black people in your company are treated equally? When you look at your hiring processes, who are usually the assistants? Who are the security guards? And why are they not offered positions at higher levels? We need to be having these conversations because representation matters, right? If we're going to be the future of tomorrow, I need to see people looking like me in the roles I want to get in order for me to feel like it's possible. Because hearing it is all well and nice, that's sweet. But how do I really know it's possible if I don't see it? So how can we change our hiring processes? How can we rethink our educational system to the point where some kids who are in school today do not know what a Confederate flag looks like? If they do not know what that looks like, how can they start fighting against white supremacy? We need to start decolonizing our education system and starting from a young age and teaching these kids the world that they are actually in, the world that is outside their doors, showing them that it's protests, not riots. And if you use the word riot, why do you use the word riot? But when the boss, when your favorite team wins, and they not destroy your city, they're just having a good time, we don't call those riots. Police don't show up, right? We don't get those headlines of these thugs were looting our small businesses. Never. So I think as a society, we just really need to, one, also take care of our mental, but also take care of our spiritual, take care of ourselves. Because sometimes as Black people, we go through so much trauma and we ingest so much trauma in whether it be in literature, whether it be in social media, on the news, in our daily lives, walking down the street, having to have these things in your mind. It's just that like I want Black people to realize that we too deserve self-love. And we too must look within ourselves and think, what am I doing to heal these scars that affect me so much? And what am I doing to make sure that my voice is heard? But also, how can I make sure that the things that I say, get people thinking, and how can I push this conversation? So that's what I was going to leave you guys with, that I just hope that, as a society, we can all really internalize our own piece in this, movement, our own jobs and our own roles, and really just play into that and tell all of your friends to pull up,
I couldn't agree more. And before we get to Siana, Eni gotta go and get her education on.
Yes, queen.
Thank you so much, Eni. Good to meet you.
Don't worry, I'm going to listen to I'm going to listen obviously, but especially because I'm missing what you're saying, Siana. I'm so sorry, but it was nice meeting you all. I'm going to sit through this 3-hour class. So bye.
Yes.
Good luck.
You got this.
You got this, sis.
Nice to meet you.
Much
Nice
love.
to meet you.
Yana, bless us before me and Mel close us out.
Listen, firstly, just everything you folks said, that was like, yes, 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 obviously, yes. And I think it's so powerful that we're coming from these different contexts, but there's like a shared understanding. I think for me, I look at it this way: we need to frame our key demands. This is something that I think it's important for us as individuals, as local communities, as diaspora groups. We need to be thinking in the way, in the form of like, what are our key demands for our lives? And I think For me, I'm looking at deep transformation. And so again, because I understand deep transformation is a marathon, it's not a sprint. This is, you know, again, stamina, this is like a long-term struggle, right? And that's not a loss, but it's important to know that from the start. So for me, you know, even just the stuff that Elke said, I'm like, listen, we need to move away from this idea of passive allyship, like you said, right? But we need to be moving towards this concept, you know, again, of active co-conspirators and accomplices. I think I'm tired of people calling themselves allies. Actually, how are you telling me you're an ally? I need, as a person in the marginalized group, I need to see your actions. They need to speak. You know, your words need to be accompanied by action at each point. So for me, I'm not looking for allies anymore. I'm looking for these co-conspirators, accomplices who are willing to sacrifice shit, who are willing to give up their power, who are willing to deal with the clashes. If we're talking about white people who are ready to deal with other white people, because a lot of white people love to just chat to black people and brown people about racism, right? Speak to your people, because that's what we need to see, okay? I'm talking about, we need to see reparations in the widest sense of what that means, okay? This is a demand that is appropriate in the UK, in the US, internationally. We need to see reparations. We need to, again, a demand that it's like, oh, people are, you know, borrowing American language. It makes perfect sense in the UK too. I need to see the police abolished. We need to see that, okay? And we need to see the end to prison industrial complex, the end to the military industrial complex. Again, these things make sense in a UK context. So we need to be engaging with those things in a very serious manner. I think it's really important. Actually, it's very difficult to have this conversation in Black communities, but we need to talk about capitalism. The fact that actually we don't need Black capitalism. We need to think about how capitalism abuses Black people, abuses Black lives, abuses brown people, abuses anybody who is marginalized, and we need to be engaging with that critically, understanding we live in a capitalist system, but it hasn't always been this way and doesn't have to be this way. We can redistribute the wealth without people feeling like we're moving into communism, but I think it's really important we have those conversations. Any of these conversations about freedom are really futile if you're not talking about capitalism, okay? We need to also see justice for this appallingly disgusting global response to COVID-19. I think we have to be thinking about that very specific context. That is, again, it is just another continuation of struggle, right? And we need to see justice for that. We also need to see climate justice. Again, I think people were talking about this as well. All of these big issues are linked. Again, who time and time again are the people that are like most affected by these things? Black people, brown people, global majority people. We need to be decolonizing language, like we said. And in a very specific UK context, we've got this term called BAME, which is BAME, Black and Minority Ethnic. We need to abolish that term, because I'm part of a global majority. I've been minoritized in this country, but even beyond that kind of minority complex it creates, it also actually erases Black people from that. So the UK can get away with saying, we've got BAME people in these positions and that. Usually they're Asian. They're usually Asian. So we need to make sure we are thinking purposefully about language. If we need to ever be discussed in any group way, it's not perfect, but I'm really putting this out there. We need to normalize language more like global majority people's GMPs. So for me, I think we have the power to do that. Elke's spoken about this, but we have to decolonize our education. In this Babylon that I live in, people are still very proud of the British Empire. Very proud of the British Empire. I'll just leave it at that. We need to decolonize our education, and we have to do it, again, like without apology. And we need to just, again, like there's so many things, but we need to understand that as we move towards justice, we need to work beyond actually just the intersectionality of self. I talk a lot about the intersectionality of struggle. After I read Angela Davis's Freedom is a Constant Struggle, I was like, oh, this is it, right? Like I think we are, many of us have an intimate understanding of like what it means to like have these multiple things going on as like an individual, but we now need to think about struggles. So when we talk about, you know, for instance, these questions are like, what does Blackness have to do with Palestine? You know, this is a question we should be engaging with. It's not a tangential issue. It's actually a very important issue when we think about freedom of all people, right? When Black people rise, we bring everybody else with us. And so for me, I just need to see people power, and everything that we do, I think that our quest for freedom has to be fueled by this quest for Black joy, because again, it's been spoken about. People are very happy to see our trauma, to see our pain, to see our struggle, and less happy to engage with actually our moments of joy. As people, whatever we're going through, we always still bring joy to the table. And I think we have to revel in that, because if we don't, if we're not fueled by Black joy and the quest for that, this is going to be a really long, painful battle, which it already is. So those are my key demands. There's many, but I think those are demands for me that transcend borders. And again, abolish these militarized borders, right? We need to be thinking about internationalism and international solidarity, and what the multitude of Blackness in this kind of global diaspora looks like. I think for too long, as people have already said eloquently, we think of this one idea of Blackness. It's actually usually modeled in the kind of a vision of like American Blackness, actually. And I think it's about time that we understand expansive Blackness. I think the people in this call, what's so great is that we come from different diasporas, and there's obviously American heritage here, African American, but there's also literally like your direct connections to the continent. So for me, there's a lot of work to do. It sounds exhausting, but let's get to work and roll up our sleeves. We've been doing that work, but this is a new phase of it, as far as I'm concerned. Those are my key demands.
Agree with every single thing, and obviously Siana and I go way back, so like I already know this, but like yeah, even more so, like completely agreed. And I think on my end, it's literally, and everyone's basically said what I would say, so that's already that. But it is, for me, the most important, having a white family, it's the idea of pulling up, because the number of times this summer I had to explain that, like, I too have been victim of racist attacks, like, of racism. I know, shock. Did you forget you have a Black person in your family?
They clearly did forget.
That's like actually related to you. Like, shock, I know. But like, it is what it is. And so I think it is definitely, and it's not even just necessarily white people, but like, I'm thinking about the fact that like in LA, the longest running kind of like ethnic feud was between like Koreans and Black people. Like that, in like here you have feuds between like South Asians and like people who are Black. So in France, it's like North Africans versus like Sub-Saharan Africans. We actually need to all unite, because unfortunately, the white man sees us as BIM. So if we are all under this one same group for this one institutional being, like of a system that we live in, then we actually need to actually unite as well, and to stop seeing these differences that we've been, you know, brought up to believe it or exist between us, when it's actually like, no, we are all like, it's not even that we're all equally resilient, but it's like, yeah, when Black people are lifted up, they uplift everyone else with them. And I think this is the time for us to be extremely uplifted and to uplift our brothers and sisters from other diasporas. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yes.
That's
No, thank you. First of all, I'm going to say a big thank you to everyone, including Eni, even though we can't see her face on screen, for coming to the table and giving everybody their thoughts on how we move forward. It's been echoed so many times throughout this call that we are all coming to this table with different experiences that have allowed us to have this conversation in a myriad of different ways. And that's why we're here. Each of us has a very singular story that is unique and it is worth telling. But there is somebody out there that is listening to each of us that identifies with exactly what we are saying. And that is why we are speaking. Activism is something that is not it's not a one-trick horse. It's not a one-trick pony. It comes in a bunch of different shapes and sizes.
And it's not a one-time thing either.
Woo, one more time. Flackers, learn that now. But yeah, it's learn to get involved. I think I say this every single time. Do not show up to this podcast and then go back to your community and not have this conversation, not figure out how you should be getting involved. I don't care if you are in the streets or on your keypad or donating your money, giving your time, talking to your friends. If you are in the US and you are not registered to vote, if you do not finish this podcast and figure out your registration status, you learned nothing.
I'm getting my ballot soon, actually.
Very proud of you.
Come on now. Come on now. You can register online. Come on now.
There are a million different ways to do this. And you just learned this from this conversation. This diaspora is large, it is wide, and it is full of depth. So engage with everyone across this diaspora, because we need each other to continue to push things forward. This has been an epic episode of Got Melanin, and we have to say thank you all.
Thank you. What an amazing episode.
You.
Everybody gather round and listen to my song.